The most powerful person in any room is usually the quietest one. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they have learned something most people never will. That disappearing is not weakness. It is strategy. It is wisdom. It is, perhaps, the most misunderstood form of strength in human history. Most people are addicted to being seen. They post, they perform, they explain themselves to people who never asked. They defend their choices to people who do not matter. They shrink themselves to fit into conversations that were never worth having in the first place. And the strange part, they call this living. Look honestly at your life. How many times have you spoken when silence would have served you better? How many times have you responded to criticism, not because it needed a response, but because your ego could not tolerate the discomfort of being misunderstood? This is the invisible trap most people live inside their entire lives. And they never even see the bars. The human mind is wired to react. This is not a flaw. It is ancient biology. Your nervous system was designed to respond fast. Danger arrives. You move, but here's the problem. That same reactive system now governs your social life, your reputation, your decisions, your relationships. Someone insults you online and your body treats it like a predator in the grass. Someone ignores you and your mind manufactures an entire crisis. You are reacting to shadows. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. They noticed that most human suffering is not caused by events. It is caused by the story we build around events in the fraction of a second before we think. Epictetus, a man who was born into slavery and lost everything the world calls valuable, said this: "It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things." Pause for a moment and let that land. Because if it is true, then almost everything you have been anxious about is not a problem outside you. It is a pattern inside you. The Stoics had a practice called voluntary discomfort. They would deliberately remove themselves from comfort, from noise, from social performance, not as punishment, as training. Marcus Aurelius, arguably the most powerful man alive during his reign over Rome, kept a private journal. No audience, no applause. He wrote to himself, challenged himself, corrected himself in complete silence. He was surrounded by power, and yet he consistently returned to solitude, not to escape the world, but to remain unconquered by it. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about this. A man who commanded empires chose, repeatedly, to disappear into his own mind. Not because the world did not need him, but because he knew that without that inner clarity, the world would consume him. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear for the world. The version of you that performs, seeks approval, and adjusts itself constantly based on who is watching. Most people never question the persona. They become it. They build their entire identity around how they are perceived, and when the perception changes, when they are criticized, ignored, or replaced, they fall apart. Because the mask was all they had. This is the trap. You work to be seen. You exhaust yourself maintaining an image, and somewhere deep inside, a quieter, stronger version of you waits, never given permission to breathe. The powerful people who choose to disappear are not running from the world. They are returning to themselves. The shift is subtle but total. Instead of asking, "What will people think?" you begin asking, "What do I actually believe?" Instead of managing your reputation, you focus on building your character, because Aristotle understood that character is not what people say about you when you are present. It is what remains when everything external is stripped away. You stop needing the room to validate you. You stop needing the argument to end in your favor. You stop measuring your worth in notifications, acknowledgments, and applause. You become, in the truest sense, internally governed. Imagine this situation. You are at work. A colleague takes credit for your idea in front of everyone. The reactive mind wants to correct them immediately, publicly, emotionally. And perhaps you do. And perhaps you win the moment. But what did it cost you? Now imagine the person who says nothing, not from fear, but from awareness. They note the behavior. They adjust their approach. They move with quiet precision. Over time, the truth surfaces naturally, because it always does. And they have not compromised their composure in the process. Or consider social pressure. The slow accumulation of other people's opinions, pressing against your choices. Stay in the city. Take the safe job. Don't risk anything unusual. Most people buckle not because they lack strength, but because they have never learned to sit with disapproval long enough for it to lose its power. Seneca wrote, "Retire into yourself as much as you can, not as a permanent escape, but as a regular recalibration, a return to your own axis." Socrates walked the streets of Athens, asking questions that made powerful men deeply uncomfortable. He owned almost nothing. He sought no office, no title, no public monument, and yet, 2,500 years later, his thinking still shapes how humanity understands itself. He understood something radical, that the unexamined life produces noise, and noise is the enemy of wisdom. The people who disappear periodically from the performance of social life are often the people who are doing the most serious work. The work is internal. It is unglamorous. It leaves no trace on a public feed. But it produces something rare, a person who cannot be easily moved, easily manipulated, or easily broken. If this kind of depth is something you want more of, consider subscribing. This channel exists for exactly these conversations. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, honestly, when was the last time you sat in silence without reaching for your phone? When was the last time you allowed someone to misunderstand you and chose not to correct them? Not from weakness, but from peace. When was the last time you made a decision based on your own deepest values, rather than the approval of someone whose life you do not even wish to live? These are not rhetorical questions. They are diagnostic ones. The answers reveal where you actually are, not where you imagine yourself to be. Here is what accumulates over time when you master this. You become harder to manipulate, because manipulation requires a bit of gap, a need for approval, a fear of loss, a craving for validation. Close those gaps and you become, in the most practical sense, free. You become more precise in your actions, because you are no longer spending energy performing, or defending, or reacting. That energy returns to you. You use it to build things that last. And perhaps most powerfully, you develop a relationship with yourself that does not depend on the world's participation. That is not isolation, that is sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius did not build his inner life to become cold or disconnected. He built it so that when the empire demanded everything, he had something left to give. He could be fully present in the world, because he had never completely surrendered himself to it. The most powerful people you will ever encounter are not the loudest. They are not the ones constantly proving something. They are the ones who have learned when to step back, go quiet, and let clarity do what noise never could. Disappearing is not retreat. It is refinement. It is the practice of returning to what is essential, stripping away the performance, the approval-seeking, the anxious noise, and finding beneath all of it something steady, something real, something that does not need the world's permission to exist. You do not have to announce your growth. You do not have to perform your strength. You do not have to explain your silence. Simply become, quietly, completely. That is the Stoic way. And in a world that never stops demanding your attention, choosing to disappear, even briefly, even inwardly, may be the most radical act of power available to you.